We begin with NBC's senior national security correspondent, Courtney Cubey, Reuters White House correspondent, Jeff Mason, and former RNC communications director, John High. So, Courtney, help us understand about the, help us understand about this so-called dirty line. What is it?
Yeah, so this is an unsecure, as you mentioned, communication line that really defies the general security protocol for an internet or for an outside communication line here in the Pentagon. Now, most of the offices here are, you're not allowed to bring your phone, no AirPods, no Apple Watches, nothing like this. But then there are also a number of them that are considered a SCIF. That's a secure, compartmentalized area. What we have now learned, and this really came from originally from fantastic reporting out of our colleagues at the Associated Press, is that, in fact, the Secretary defied those normal protocols for securing information here in the Pentagon and insisted that he have one of these, quote, dirty lines or an outside insecure line installed in his office. Now, his office is one of those secure, compartmentalized, or generally known as a SCIF. It is one of those, so it would not generally be allowed in there. Now, this just follows a string of incidents that we are learning about and have learned about over the last several weeks about the Secretary, in which he appears to have a lack of respect or acknowledgement for some of the basic security protocols that exist, or when you're the head of the Pentagon and you have access to so much sensitive information. Of course, we learned earlier this week that not only was there the signal chat that was created by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz last month, that Secretary Hegseth included sensitive and imminent military information, operations that were about to unfold with the Houthis in Yemen, but we also learned earlier this week that, in fact, the Secretary started his own signal chat and included family members on it, including his wife, his brother, his personal attorney, and other close aides, and also shared military information on that chat. Of course, his wife is not an employee of the Department of Defense. His brother is, but really would have no reason to need to know anything about military operations against the Houthis. And Jose, just to add to that, we also learned, in fact, the information that he was sharing on these signal chats. This is an unclassified commercial app. That information came directly, in some cases word for word, from the commanding general of U.S. Central Command, General Eric Kurilla. General Kurilla sent that to the Secretary on a classified system, Jose.
And what more are you learning about the Secretary's behavior?
Yeah, and so amidst all of these scandals and what has really been a constant drumbeat of reporting about the Secretary's judgment, some of the things that he's been doing, the Secretary has become increasingly erratic, according to a number of officials who we spoke with. He seems more and more insecure about his role in the administration, officials saying that he is increasingly prioritizing things about his image, going on Fox News, so that where he thinks he can directly speak to to President Trump, and he can show him he's still a fighter. But you mentioned one of the most notable cases here, and that was several weeks ago when the New York Times was about to report that they had learned about this classified Elon Musk briefing on China that was to occur here. When the Secretary found out that a reporter had uncovered this imminent briefing, he lashed out at the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Chris Grady, telling him that he would expletive polygraph him if he found out that he was a leaker, and that he and his staff also threatened to polygraph other senior officials here, as you mentioned, 3- and 4-star generals and admirals who had not only access to the meeting, but the agenda for that meeting. Jose, this is the kind of behavior, look, maybe it happens behind the scenes more often than we realize, but it's not the kind of behavior we're used to hearing from the Secretary of Defense, specifically when dealing with his most senior military advisors and aides.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, what is the relationship between the president and Hegseth? The vice president and the president have, until right now, been very strong in their support for Hegseth. Is that also in private?
Well, I think you're right to emphasize that. They've been very strong in terms of what they've said about Hegseth in public. The press secretary has come out from the podium and said that the president supports him. He also picked him for a reason. He likes the guy. And some of these issues were flagged in terms of Hegseth's inexperience running a big department like this, and some other administrative issues, not to mention some of his other personal issues, were all part of his nomination process. And those were things that President Trump was willing to tolerate. If you look, though, at his history of dealing with other aides in his first administration and other top cabinet officials, his patience doesn't last forever. So not forecasting anything, but I do understand why a defense secretary in his position would want to be appealing to the president by going on Fox News right now.
Now, patience may not last forever, but one questions what happens when his patience run out. What does he do or not do?
Yeah, well, that's the question that I don't have an answer to. It'll depend on how this continues to develop, and it will depend on whether President Trump himself feels like Hegseth is just getting unfairly treated by the press or by the people around him, or whether he says, all right, enough is enough, this is a distraction from my actual agenda. But I do think it's important to underscore that he likes Hegseth, he chose him for a reason, and he may have even anticipated that there would be some drama around him because there was drama around his nomination.
I want us to also bring in MSNBC military analyst and former deputy commander of the U.S. European Command, Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. General, it's great seeing you. So Courtney was talking about how the Secretary's office is a SCIF. If you would tell us about what a SCIF is, and an entire office is a SCIF, so what would being in a SCIF preclude?
Yeah, so appreciate being on your show there, Jose. It is a secret compartmented office where you can take classified information, whether it be secret information or top secret information, inside his office, and it has the security requirements necessary to either talk about classified information or share classified information with folks that are cleared. And oh, by the way, everyone that comes in his office and they're going to talk about classified information, they must be cleared, and there's certain protocols that they must go through before they enter that office, ensuring that they have proper security clearance and so forth. But I had a SCIF as my time as a general officer. My office was used as a SCIF, and there's various protocols that are necessary before folks can even talk about classified information in that office.
Welcome back. We're back with more on our top story this hour. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth under growing scrutiny for erratic behavior at the Pentagon, including officials describing screaming matches and threats to force top military leaders to take polygraph tests after a series of leaks. There's also brand new reporting that Hegseth had a special internet line set up in his office to use the Signal app in defiance of Defense Department policy. That's according to two officials familiar with the matter. Joining us now is Sabrina Singh, former Deputy Press Secretary for the Pentagon. Sabrina, if this was anyone else in any other administration, would they still have their job at this point?
I think if this was anyone else, the answer would be no. I think there would be no question. Not only would they have been hauled in front of Congress right away, probably multiple hearings on the Hill, but they probably would have been removed from office pretty quickly, and probably at the direction of the president. So what we're seeing here is sort of unprecedented behavior, but also nothing new from this administration. We know that Donald Trump does like the way Pete Hegseth goes out there and defends him every single day. So while in any other administration, I think Democrat or Republican, things would be different. Unfortunately, that's not the case here.
When it comes specifically to this special internet line that Secretary Hegseth had installed, can you walk us through what would and wouldn't be allowed under DoD policy when it comes to that?
Well, that completely flies in the face of DoD policy. And basically what Pete Hegseth did was choose convenience over cybersecurity. Working in the Pentagon, you do sit in secure office spaces, rooms that can handle classified information. These are called SCIFs. That's what the Secretary of Defense's office is. It is a SCIF. It allows them to access classified information at the highest levels. And you are not allowed to bring your personal phones into these rooms because it's not safe. And so when you bring a personal device or install, in this case, a private internet line, so he can access Signal on a personal desktop, that widens the aperture for adversaries and cyber hacking groups to try and hack into the secretary's personal devices. This is a device or a desktop that's not going to have the same security protocols as, a work computer or classified systems. And so basically what the secretary has done yet again is put at risk our national security and most, damaging and most importantly here that should be highlighted is that he's putting at risk our military, our men and women in uniform, by the fact that he has a personal line like this installed in his office, which he does not need for any reason at all.
And counterintel people have said that he would be probably in the top 5 of folks who would be targeted for espionage by foreign adversaries. Sabrina, there's also just a culture issue that we're reporting on today that he's creating at the Pentagon, acting erratic, yelling. Here's just one example. When he learned about the leak of the second signal chat, Hegseth screamed at the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying he will effing polygraph him to find out if he leaked the information about the meeting, according to 3 U.S. officials familiar with the meeting. Plus, Politico has this reporting today, writing that the staff is now focused on building an aura around Hegseth by pushing out videos of his memo signings and early morning workouts, causing fears from current and former defense officials that some of the less photo-worthy events could face delays. What does all of this mean for just day-to-day operations?
You know, I greatly appreciate that he likes to engage with the troops and work out with them, but I'd really like it as if he focused on his job. The Secretary of Defense, that job is very complex. It is very intense. There's a lot that goes into it. And the priority should always be protecting our men and women in uniform and our civilian workforce.
Are the chickens coming home to roost for Trump? Because we've talked about this. The reason we're getting such dribs and drabs about Hegseth and whatnot is because there are people, rightfully so, who want him gone and don't respect him and don't respect Trump for picking him, right? No one's circling the wagons. Often when you have scandals like this, the wagons are circled. Somebody at the mid-level, at the low level is removed. Yes, we've seen some of that. The people are made sacrificial lambs, but an effort is made to protect the reputation and position of the secretary and the president themselves. But we're not seeing that. The scandal didn't happen and then it kind of went away. It's been dribbing and drabbing, and the dribbing and drabbing seems like, maybe this is my speculation, there are forces in there trying at the Pentagon, trying to humiliate Hegseth and, at least by proxy, humiliate Trump. And we have to understand this. This is one of the reasons why this was such a bad pick. It wasn't just ideology. It wasn't just the concerning stuff that Hegseth said. It was that he was unqualified. There's a reason why his confirmation was so close. It was one of the closest ones this cycle. Usually secretaries of defense are among the least partisan votes in the Senate confirmation. Not always, but usually. If you go back over the last 30, 40 years and you look at confirmations that are close, it's almost never the Secretary of Defense. You often see them get 95 votes. You know, almost unanimous, and even then, out of the 5, it might only be 1 or 2 no votes because it's like 2 or 3 people weren't there, but they probably would have voted yes if they were there, but they didn't even bother to show up because they knew that day that the only vote they had was for the Secretary of Defense, and that guy had like 95% support, so, you know, you can miss that day of work. I'm not defending it, but, like, that's their process, right? Right? You saw this with Trump's first term. His Secretary of Defense was not as controversial as many of his picks. Biden's Secretary of Defense easily coasted in, right? Like, you see this because it's not supposed to be a partisan position, but Trump made it as such, and people are revolting against him.